Imagine stealing not just any plane, but a military aircraft worth millions of dollars, and vanishing into thin air. In 1984, this wasn't a movie plot, but the shocking reality when a decorated pilot made an unthinkable decision that left the world's most powerful air force scrambling for answers. The United States Air Force prides itself on rigorous selection and training of its pilots. Each aircraft represents not just a massive financial investment, but the collective effort of thousands of personnel who maintain, support, and defend these critical assets. When Captain Alan Morrow disappeared with an F-16 Fighting Falcon, he didn't just steal government property, he betrayed the trust of his squadron, his base, and every taxpayer who funded that $14 million aircraft. The early 1980s marked a tense period in the Cold War. President Ronald Reagan had increased military spending significantly, and the U.S. Air Force was expanding its capabilities with advanced fighter jets. Haber Air Force Base in South Dakota housed the 77th Tactical Fighter Squadron, operating the relatively new F-16s. These single-seat fighters were considered cutting-edge technology, fast, agile, and lethal. The pilots who flew them were among the elite of the military, trusted with incredibly powerful machines capable of reaching twice the speed of sound. Looking back, there were subtle signs that Captain Morrow was struggling. His commanding officer, Major Robert Teller, would later recall noticing changes in the usually sociable pilot's behavior. He became withdrawn, started missing social events with the squadron. Fellow pilots mentioned Morrow had been making unusual inquiries about fuel ranges and international flight paths during briefings. His ex-wife later revealed he had been making large cash withdrawals in the months before the incident. Most concerning was his request for additional solo training flights, something that seemed innocuous at the time, but would later be recognized as preparation for his plan. The situation developed over several months. In January 1984, Morrow's divorce was finalized after a bitter custody battle. March, he began selling personal possessions and converting assets to cash. April, security logs showed Morrow accessing the base during off-hours, studying maintenance schedules. In May, he transferred $50,000 to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. On June 14th, Morrow successfully requested a dawn training flight, citing a need to practice low-visibility maneuvers. On June 15th, for 13 a.m., he arrived at the base 3 hours before his scheduled flight. 5:28 a.m., without proper clearance, Morrow taxied the F-16 to the runway. 5:32 a.m., he took off, initially following a standard training route. 5:47 a.m., Morrow switched off all communication systems and deviated from his flight plan. At 5:52 a.m., radar operators noticed Morrow's aircraft suddenly change course, heading southeast toward the Atlantic Ocean. When repeated radio calls went unanswered, the control tower initiated emergency protocols. 2 F-15 interceptors were scrambled from a neighboring base, but by the time they reached Morrow's last known position, the F-16 had disappeared from radar coverage. The pivotal moment came when Morrow, a pilot with 7 years of experience and multiple commendations, made the deliberate choice to fly below radar altitude, using the terrain to mask his escape while disabling the aircraft's transponder. The Air Force immediately launched what would become one of the most extensive searches in military history. The investigation faced unprecedented challenges. 1. No flight plan had been filed for Morrow's actual route. 2. The F-16's range with external fuel tanks could potentially reach several countries. 3. Weather conditions that morning created a 3-hour window where satellite surveillance was compromised. The FBI joined the investigation, discovering Morrow had been studying maps of the Caribbean and had taken Spanish-language courses. Agents traced his financial movements, finding evidence of planning dating back 18 months. The international nature of the case required coordination with Interpol and multiple foreign governments. Perhaps most disturbing was the discovery that Morrow had systematically gathered information on radar blind spots and fuel requirements for an overwater flight. The breakthrough came 3 weeks later when a commercial fishing vessel reported debris in the waters off the coast of Venezuela. Local authorities recovered several components identified as parts of an F-16 fighter. 6 days after that, Morrow himself was found in Maracaibo, living under the name Carlos Vega. His capture involved a joint operation between Venezuelan police and U.S. federal agents, who had tracked a series of unusual currency exchanges to a local bank. When confronted, Morrow surrendered without resistance, asking only, "How did you find me?" The investigation revealed he had ejected from the aircraft over international waters and been picked up by a prearranged private boat. The F-16 itself was programmed to continue on autopilot until it ran out of fuel and crashed into the ocean, a plan that nearly worked perfectly. Morrow was extradited to the United States to face military court-martial. The charges were severe: theft of military property, desertion, unauthorized flight, and compromising national security. The trial lasted 7 weeks, with the prosecution presenting overwhelming evidence of premeditation. Morrow was found guilty on all charges and sentenced to 25 years in military prison. The judge, Colonel William Hargrove, stated during sentencing, "This was not just theft, but a calculated betrayal of oath, country, and comrades." The case had significant impacts beyond Morrow himself. His ex-wife and children faced public scrutiny and eventually relocated under new identities. The Air Force implemented stricter security protocols for solo flights and aircraft access. Perhaps most painfully, Morrow's former squadron lived with the stain of his actions, working for years to rebuild their reputation. Forensic psychologists who evaluated Morrow identified a complex combination of factors that contributed to his actions. Dr. Elena Vasquez, who conducted extensive interviews with him, noted, "We saw a perfect storm of personal crisis, narcissistic tendencies, and a profound sense of entitlement." The messy divorce and loss of regular access to his children appeared to be significant triggers, but experts identified deeper issues. Morrow exhibited what psychologists term specialized narcissism, an inflated sense of his own exceptional abilities as a pilot that he felt weren't properly recognized. This, combined with financial problems and mounting personal resentments, created what Dr. Vasquez called a dangerous rationalization process where he began to see himself as justified in taking what he believed he deserved. Military sociologists pointed to the case as an example of how specialized training and access to high-value assets can, in rare cases, create unique risk factors when combined with personal instability. The Morrow incident led to sweeping changes in military aviation security. 1. Implementation of the two-person concept for all combat aircraft. 2. Psychological evaluation protocols were enhanced and scheduled more frequently. 3. Financial monitoring became standard for personnel with access to valuable assets. 4. New tracking technologies were developed for military aircraft. The case has since become a standard study in Air Force security training, with the Morrow protocols still referenced in current military procedures. Beyond the military, the incident sparked a national conversation about the psychological pressures faced by elite military personnel and the need for better support systems. The Morrow case raises profound questions about trust, duty, and the psychological burden placed on those we entrust with extraordinary power. How do we balance the need to empower our military personnel with the potential risks that come with such authority? While Morrow's actions were clearly criminal, they also highlight the complex interplay between personal crisis and professional responsibility. When we give individuals the keys to incredibly powerful machines, what safeguards, both technological and psychological, must be in place? What do you think was the most significant failure that allowed this hijacking to happen? Was it technological, procedural, or human? And what other famous military desertions or thefts do you find most intriguing? Let me know in the comments below. Some betrayals leave scars that never fully heal. The case of Captain Morrow remains a sobering reminder that sometimes the greatest threats come not from our enemies, but from within our own ranks. While the aircraft was eventually found, the question of what truly drives someone to betray their oath remains as relevant today as it was in 1984. If you found this story compelling, hit that subscribe button for more true stories that explore the darkest chapters of human behavior. Remember, history's most important lessons often come from its most troubling moments.